What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Got a lot to talk about today. Also, I may have a video up later today if there's something that I find interesting from the Senior Bowl. I know a lot of you guys are going to have your eyes on that at about 2:30, so definitely check that out. I know Malik Willis will be at the quarterback spot. A lot of Giants fans are interested in that. But in this video, we're going to talk about the big moves that went down for the New York Giants in both the front office and in terms of the defensive coordinator. Late last night, I was on Bad Dog streaming at about 11 o'clock, maybe a little bit earlier than that. Word had come out that Patrick Graham will not be returning for the New York Giants as the defensive coordinator. Graham, of course, was the DC for the Giants for the last 2 years. Before that was with the Miami Dolphins with Brian Flores. Whether or not that played into his decision, I don't know. It obviously could have. They were good friends. The fact that Brian Flores felt disrespected by the New York Giants and that Patrick Graham is taking a lateral move leads me to believe that it's at least a possibility. The other thing that I could argue and say, well, Josh McDaniels, of course, is the new head coach for the Raiders, another guy that Patrick Graham is very familiar with, much like he was with Joe Judge. They were very good friends. So maybe he felt that the Raiders were a better opportunity. After all, they do have some good pass rushers over there with Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. Not to mention, they're probably going to be a better team next year. So if Patrick Graham is looking to potentially move up the ranks and become a head coach, it would probably better suit him to be on a better football team. More eyes are generally going to be on a team that's competing for the playoffs than that is in year one of a rebuild, like the New York Giants more than likely will be next year. So I think it was probably the best in terms of his potential career development. And I think that's why Patrick Graham took the job. As a Giants fan, I'm sad to see him go. I've seen a lot of Giants fans talk about the fact that they thought that Patrick Graham was too passive, that he's not aggressive enough, that he plays too much bend but don't break. But at the end of the day, I thought that he kind of tried to fit to the personnel that the New York Giants had. We didn't have a great defensive presence off the edge, and I think Graham realized that, and he tried to play to the strengths to this defense. And more often than not, I thought he did a pretty good job. He started off rocky his second year, but I thought, by week 4 or 5, the Giants defense started to get it into gear. So I think he will be missed, but there are some really good candidates that the New York Giants could be looking at to replace Patrick Graham. And in this video, I'll jump into the 2 names so far that have come out. I've also heard that there may be upwards of another 4 that the Giants look to bring in to replace Patrick Graham at the defensive coordinator spot. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. One of the names is Don Wink Martindale. That is confirmed. Wink will be coming in for an interview, I believe, today for that spot, along with another individual. We'll jump into all of it. But the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the new assistant general manager for the New York Giants. And before we jump into him, the first thing I'm going to say, obviously I don't know a ton about him outside of the fact that he graduated from Fordham. He's been with the Eagles. I know a lot of Giants fans may not want to hear that, but I think this is a clear indication that John Mara is allowing Joe Schoen to make the moves that he may want to make. A lot of Giants fans worry about the fact that does Mara have too much control? We know he thinks very highly of Kevin Abrams. Abrams was formerly the assistant GM for the New York Giants. Now, I'm going to assume, based on things that I've heard in the past, that Abrams more than likely will stay on with the Giants, but I would think it would be more along the lines of his initial job, why he was hired by the Giants, and that was to be a capologist, a cap expert. He will probably help Joe Schoen maneuver the cap, but it sounds like the New York Giants are bringing in more of a football guy to help be the assistant GM, and I think that's some great news for the New York Giants. But let's jump into it. This coming out from Adam Schefter. Giants are hiring Eagles director player personnel Brandon Brown as their assistant general manager per sources. Eagles continue identifying and grooming young talent. Joe Douglas, Andrew Berry, Ian Cunningham, Patrick Stewart, that other teams recently promoted to high-ranking jobs. Joe Douglas, of course, the general manager with the New York Jets. So he's just going over some names that people have plucked from the Eagles in the past and have shown that they've done a pretty good job elsewhere. When you think about the Eagles, you think about a team that has built the team properly, at least in my opinion. I hate to say that as a Giants fan, but they are strong in the trenches. That is definitely the strength of that football team, and that is what I think the New York Giants have to get back to. Brandon Brown, a young emerging name that will now be the assistant GM, and it's certainly an upgrade, in my opinion at least, over a guy like Kevin Abrams. This is his full resume. Got this off the Eagles website. First, we'll go over the career timeline, then we'll go over the notes. Career timeline started with the New York Jets, actually, as a pro personnel intern in 2012, then went to Boston College as a recruiting specialist in 2013, became the assistant director of player personnel in 2014, then was a scouting assistant with the Indianapolis Colts before becoming an advanced scout in 2016. In 2017 and 2018, he became the assistant director of pro scouting for the Eagles. Then the next 2 years, he was the director of pro scouting before becoming the director of player personnel this past year and getting a bump up in the Philadelphia Eagles pecking order. In terms of his overview, Brandon Brown enters his 5th season with the Philadelphia Eagles and 7th overall in the NFL. He was promoted to Director of Player Personnel during the 2021 offseason. In his new role, Brown oversees the Eagles pro scouting department while also doing crossover work on the college scouting side in collaboration with co-director of Player Personnel Ian Cunningham. Brown previously served as the Philadelphia Eagles Director of Pro Scouting for 2 seasons, like we just said. Prior to the Eagles, Brown spent 2 seasons with the Indianapolis Colts as an advanced scout and scouting assistant. During his time at Boston College, he was the Assistant Director of Player Personnel. A 4-year letterman as a defensive back at Fordham University, Brown earned his bachelor's degree in business administration with a dual concentration in entrepreneurship and communications media management. After graduating from Fordham in 2010, Brown earned a doctorate degree from Barry University Law School in Orlando, Florida, where he was named lead articles editor of, I guess, some newspaper. While pursuing his law degree at Barry, Brown worked as athletic compliance graduate assistant football support at the University of Central Florida and then broke into the NFL as a pro personnel intern with the New York Jets in the summer of 2012. And listen, I don't know too much about Brandon Brown other than what I just told you guys. I don't follow the Philadelphia Eagles. He's not even the general manager, but I think it's an upgrade, and to me, the most important thing here is it signifies that Joe Schoen is starting to bring his guys in. I don't expect to see a complete overhaul in terms of, getting rid of all the scouts before the draft starts, because like I've talked about in the past, these guys have been preparing now for the draft for the New York Giants long before they even hired Joe Schoen, and I think it's just not a natural transition to expect Joe Schoen to get rid of everybody that he doesn't want here before the draft starts. After all, Joe Schoen, if you go back and look at his history with the Buffalo Bills, didn't come on until after the draft in 2017. So I think you'll see more of a shift after the draft when Schoen starts to bring in the guys that he feels need replacing from within the New York Giants field office. But either way, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it's a clear indication that John Mara is allowing Joe Schoen to make the decisions that he feels he has to make to get this New York Giants team back to where they need to be. In terms of the defensive coordinator search, let's jump into that. Obviously, we know at this point in time the Giants have moved on from Patrick Graham. That news came out late last night. This coming out from Ian Rappaport. The Giants are conducting defensive coordinator interviews this weekend, speaking with former Ravens defensive coordinator Don Wink Martindale and former Bears defensive coordinator Sean Desai today. Sources say there are 4 or so others. So according to Rappaport, expect to see about 6 candidates for this defensive coordinator job. The team now has the spot open with Patrick Graham leaving for Vegas. This is the resume for Sean Desai. Then we'll talk a bit about Don Wink Martindale. Of course, as Giants fans, we're fairly familiar with Don Wink Martindale. He interviewed for the New York Giants head coaching job in 2020. He's been with the Baltimore Ravens as both the linebackers coach and more recently a defensive coordinator. This is Desai. Desai started with Temple as a defensive and special teams coach for 5 years from 2006 to 2010, then went to Miami, the college team, in 2011 as an assistant director of football operations before going to Boston College as both the running back coach and special teams coordinator. Then went to the Bills from 2013 to 2018, worked as a defensive quality control coach, then was a safeties coach for 2 years before ultimately becoming the defensive coordinator this past year in 2021. And a lot of people are going to ask that are watching this video that don't know much about him, why did he only hold the job for 1 year? Well, the answer had nothing to do with the Bears' performance on defense. Last year, the Bears had a top 10 defense, and they actually surprised many with how good the defense was. The reason he lost his job was the head coach was fired. And a lot of times when the head coach is fired, as we're seeing with the New York Giants, there's a lot of changes to the other positions from within the coaching staff. So that is the main reason why he was fired. He's been interviewed by several other teams to potentially fulfill vacancies as a defensive coordinator, the Raiders being one of them. This then coming out from Art Stapleton regarding Desai. Text from a former player who knows Sean Desai well. One of the best. Love him. The process to find the next Giants defensive coordinator begins. Patrick Graham is a good coach, but Brian Daboll will have options for his successor. This coming out as well. In his first year as the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator this season, Schoen Desai did an excellent job with what he had to work with. Still, with the Bears undergoing a total overhaul of the front office and coaching staff, Desai is not sticking around, according to Adam Johns. This was the type of defense that he ran, and I think that's going to be a big question mark by a lot of Giants fans. In terms of the breakdown, in terms of the type of defense that they ran. The Bears used a 3-4 front in 2021. They played 65% zone and 20% man, used a pretty even mix of 1 high and 2 high safety coverages, and blitzed 24% of the time. Desai's favorite coverages were cover 1, cover 3, and cover 6. So sounds kind of similar to the type of defense that Patrick Graham ran. If I had to guess, the breakdowns were probably similar. A 3-4 defense. Graham, we all know, played a lot of zone due to the limitations, more than likely, of the pass rush for the New York Giants. Blitzed about 24% of the time. If I had to guess, that's probably on par with what Graham did with the New York Giants this past year. Of course, that's just a guess. But it sounds like a similar type of defensive philosophy to that of Patrick Graham. Obviously, I'm sure the scheme is not identical. The other candidate, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know about, is Don Wink Martindale. And Don Wink Martindale couldn't be any further from the opposite of a guy like Schoen Desai in terms of his overall defensive philosophy. He is going to blitz. I went to Pro Football Reference, and I think it only goes back to 2018 in terms of blitz frequency. I think that's when Wink Martindale, might have been 2017, we're going to go over the timeline, became the defensive coordinator with the Ravens. In 2018, 2019, and 2020, the Baltimore Ravens led the NFL in blitz frequency each of those years. And in 2019, they blitzed 55% of the time. To put that in context, the second highest team was the Bucs at 41%. So he is a very aggressive defensive coordinator. Now, one could argue he's had a very good secondary, and that allows him to be as aggressive as he's been. The Ravens, over those 3 years, 2018, 2019, and 2020, ranked 7th or better in defense. This past year, they took a big step back, which is why Don Wink Martindale ultimately got fired by the Baltimore Ravens. I think they finished 22nd or 24th in the low 20s in terms of overall defense. Now, of course, they were missing 3/4 of their starting secondary. So, if the Giants were to bring in a guy like Don Wink Martindale, I would expect them to heavily focus on strengthening that secondary, because he's a guy that tries to manufacture blitzes and manufactures pressure. That's the type of defensive coordinator he is. He doesn't necessarily need to have the most talented edge rushers. He's going to try to beat you with his scheme. This is his career timeline. Was an assistant at Notre Dame from 94 to 95, then went to Cincinnati, then went to Western Illinois, Western Kentucky, before breaking into the NFL with the Oakland Raiders from 04 to 08 as a linebackers coach, then went to the Broncos as a linebackers coach in 2009 before becoming their defensive coordinator for 1 year. Then was a linebackers coach for the Ravens from 2012 to 2017 before becoming the defensive coordinator for Harbaugh from 2018 to 2021. Like I said, had great success his first 3 years as a DC. This past year took a step back, but obviously was really highly thought of, which is why the New York Giants brought him in for a head coaching job to begin with. Getting to know Don Wink Martindale just a little bit more, the Ravens might not have the marquee pass rushing names you would like to see on defense, but they do have a defensive guru who will be just as important to the pass rush as the talent on the field, Woodward wrote. Martindale has been more aggressive in general, but especially on 3rd and long situations or do or die situations, Woodward added. Not only is he aggressive, but he's also creative with how he maneuvers the defense. A lot of Martindale's system is predicated on communication pre-snap and making on-the-fly adjustments. It's not just calling a play and rolling with it. It's about teaching the defense how to read what the offense might be doing and teaching them how to make those adjustments. So Wink Martindale obviously has a very good reputation. Who knows why he was ultimately fired? You have to think it had to do with the fact that the Ravens defense took a step back, but obviously Lamar Jackson going down didn't help the defense, right? So I'm sure he's a very good candidate. He's a guy I've had my eye on. I would love to bring in Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio actually influenced a lot of the modern-day defenses from within the NFL with the work that he was able to do with both the Chicago Bears and the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see who the other 4 candidates that the New York Giants are looking to bring in are. I think both these guys sound like really good candidates, though. Patrick Graham's going to be tough shoes to fill, though. For all the New York Giants fans who didn't like him, obviously, a lot of other teams do think he's a very good candidate because you saw a lot of people lining him up for interviews, and I do think he will be missed. That's not to say he can't be replaced. I think both these guys I just talked about seem like great candidates, and both of them have shown success in years past. Don Wink Martindale a little bit more proven due to the fact that he was a DC for 3 more years, but both of them had good success at their prior stops. I think they'll come with different philosophies, and I think it'll come down to the overall philosophy that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable want to institute for this football team. If you're looking for a guy that's ultra aggressive, I think Don Wink Martindale is your man. If you're looking for a guy that's a little bit more balanced, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I'm glad to see that the New York Giants are starting to make more and more changes to their front office, and I'm excited to see who the future DC will be for Big Blue. As always, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.